I've been rebuilding clock radios from the 1950 tube sets, All-American 5s, because my grandmother had one, and I wanted to learn how to do it. I haven't done any YouTube videos about it because there's too many YouTube videos about how to fix All-American 5 radios, but I've been enjoying it. Anyway, I bought one of these radios, this GE's, to learn how to do it, and then I bought another one that had a good plastic case because the first one I bought had a crummy case, but that got broken in shipment because the eBay seller didn't do a good job of packaging it. So then I bought another one with good plastic. That one was fine, and I think I bought another one because it was cheap. I bought this one down here, which is a variation on the same model, and I like the look of it. So anyway, got a bunch of radios, but since they're clock radios, alarm clock radios, it means I also now have a bunch of clocks, and these are all old Telechron clocks. And if you've searched for Telechron and found this video, you probably know the problem with them is they're driven by a Telechron inductive motor, which is a sealed unit. And after 80 years, the original lubrication from the 40s or 50s becomes this kind of tarry-like gum, and they either don't turn, or they turn slowly, or they're noisy. So they all need to be reconditioned. And that's what this video is about. You probably know the Telechron story. Henry, what's his name? Henry Warren founded the Telechron company in 1912. Patented the first synchronous electric motor in 1918. He developed it in 1916. Then convinced the power companies that they should regulate their power line frequency exactly at 60 hertz in the U.S. So it could be used for timekeeping. And then it was kind of a niche novelty luxury item in the early 20s to have electric time. It was very high tech. They were marvelously accurate, still are. Sales slowly went up to the 20s, then pooped out through the 30s because of the Depression, and then after the war, World War II, they came roaring back, and that's kind of the golden age of Telechron and clocks like this. But let me put this down so there's a little room to work here. But they're all powered by the Telechron inductive motor, which is usually called the rotor. There were A and B rotors before this. This is an H rotor, an H3 rotor, which is kind of the most common thing you're going to find in clocks from the 40s, 50s. This is a nickel brass one of the better ones. They went to kind of a cheaper aluminum later, and then I think just plain brass actually at one point as well. But this is the one you're more likely to find. So it's a sealed unit, and then there's a drive gear in front here. Let me get this other camera. Maybe I can show you a little bit there. There we go. So there's the drive gear, and you can see, so that little bump on the back, this smaller cylinder, has two lightweight magnetic armatures in it, and they're placed inside a magnetic field generated off the AC line, and that's given a slight twist to rotate it so that it'll start a motor like this. It's a very low torque, high speed motor, but enough to drive a clock. It's actually a what do they call it, a shade winding synchronous inductive motor, and so that's spinning real fast in the magnetic field. In this, it kind of floats in that magnetic field, and then the big cylinder is a reduction gear train of 1,000 to 1. So this is spinning at 3,600 RPM, and then this reduces it down to 3.6 RPM. And that's a great ratio if you want to cut through the 360 degrees of a circle and run a second hand. It makes the gearing math pretty easy. Anyway, there are two great philosophies on how to rebuild these. Basically, you want to get the old gunky oil out and put new good oil in, modern oil in. And the way you see on all the YouTube videos that are out there is to try to force oil through this gear output slot, because there's a hole down there. So essentially what people do is they heat up the rotor in an oven or with a torch or with a soldering gun heating element or a light bulb I've seen, and then put more oil in this around this, use this as a reservoir, and then as it cools, the vacuum sucks it in, and people do that 6 or 7 times to get enough oil into it. And in fact, you can take a piece of, this is 5/16 plastic tubing, and you can stick that around the output shaft to make a reservoir there that you can use to hold your new lubrication as it goes in. But they're always a little vague on how much lubrication to use, you know, a finger full or whatever. We'll talk about that. I have some ideas on what the right numbers are. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is just to drill a hole in the damn case. And that's what we're going to do here, which to me seems much simpler. And I actually had some correspondence a few months ago with Roy Mano, who runs Telechron Time and has done hundreds of these, and asked him his technique. And he's a driller as well. So that kind of confirmed to me that this is the way to go. It's so much easier once you have an access hole and faster to get the old oil out. And in fact, you can inject solvent, which is an additional step I'm going to do to really kind of get all the junk out of there. And then you fill it up with new synthetic clock oil, and then seal it with epoxy plug, as I have done here. You can see that's a lot of epoxy. It's not focusing very well, but there you go. And then this keeps completely accurate time. I timed it with a stopwatch. It's it's very precise, and it's very quiet. So finally, a YouTube video on doing these Telechron rejuvenations by drilling a hole in them, and that's what we're going to do today. So follow along, and if this recipe seems appealing to you, I hope you use it in your own projects. So let's get started. So before we get started, I thought it might be fun to listen to an unmodified rotor. I don't know if this is going to work because of the automatic gain control on the camera, but let me turn this on. And of course it's raining here, so there's a lot of noise on my roof too. But this is pretty loud. You can hear it across the room. Let me, I think it's louder in this position actually. And I'll take the mic off here and hold it up to, this is the rotor here. You can see it. It sounds kind of grindy. As I say, it's really very loud. And then here, by contrast, is a rotor I've rejuvenated, stuck into this clock here, and it's silent. Let me. There's the rotor there. I can kind of hold this up, let you hear the difference, I hope. Let's kind of get that centered. You can look at the back just quickly here. So the AC current is going into this coil, which is making a 60 hertz magnetic field across this core like a transformer, except instead of there being a coil on the other side, there's the shaded pole motor. And these are the two shading windings that are distorting the magnetic flux to make the magnetic field kind of weakly spin to start the motor from a dead stop. To get the rotor out of here, by the way, you just have to undo this screw and swing these apart, and you can just lift it out. And I imagine a lot of their clocks are that way. Okay, so this is a different clock with a fresh rotor in it, and I've taken out those screws. So we'll just pry this apart here and see if we can kind of lift this thing out. Here we go. Come in. Yep. Put that aside. So the question is, excuse me, where to oil this thing. And on the advice of a Telechron Time, you want to start here at the top where the gear is, go over to this first bump, and then drill in right here. So that's after all the writing on top of this as well. The reason you want to go in at this position is the gears are far away from the edge at this point, and also it positions you over all the gear train for your lubrication and your solvents. Now I see on the Wikipedia page they talk about drilling back here where the rotors are, and no other forum or any place else I've ever seen anybody say that that's necessary, because even though there's a divider here, the whole thing is meant to be lubricated like a car crankshaft with a little bit of oil in the bottom that is moved around by capillary action, and that includes into here. So if you can get into this case in any position, I feel, your solvents and your oils ought to go everywhere they need to go too, without having to drill a second hole back here. So let's go out and drill this thing at this position. Okay, this is my cheapo Wen drill press, and that's a 3/32 drill bit in there, and I've adjusted the table so that it's in a good position. And the nice thing is this circle in the middle of the table makes a good holder for the rotor, so you can just kind of grab it with your fingers there. Now, people drill this with Dremel tools, they drill it with hand tools, and everyone's always worried about, oh, I'm going to get metal shards inside the case. That seems to be the big objection to drilling as opposed to just using vacuum suction. I don't think that's a problem, because once you have an access hole, you'll be able to flush out anything that's in there. But the other thing, just to tip someone recommended, which I thought couldn't hurt and was easy to do, was to take some white lithium grease and just put that on the drill bit, just to kind of catch any metal pieces, so you don't have to flush them out. Can't hurt, and it's easy enough to do. So that's what we'll go ahead and do. All right, so we take this and we stick it in the hole, and we line it up over the button there after all the writing, and get ourselves aligned. And I'm going to turn it a little more, and here we go. I think my drill bit's loose and it's pushing up. It's doing the job though. Hang on a second. Oh goodness. All right, hang on. Jesus, gosh, this thing's got a crummy chuck on it too. I didn't tighten it well enough. All right, hang on. Okay, I think I got that thing in a little better. Sorry about that. Let's try this again. We're almost all the way through. And I get it lined up in the old. There we go. And we're in. Go down a little farther. There we go. Yeah, so put your drill in your chuck tightly, and things will be a lot easier to deal with. All right, on to the next step. Oh, I guess I could show you here. So this next step involves heating up the rotor, and since I'm going to do it in the kitchen, it's one of those things that's good to do when your wife is out of town, like mine is. And this is the toaster oven. These rotors have a 60 degrees centigrade temperature marking on them, so this oven's at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And we just take the broiling pan and line it here because we expect there to be some sludgy, can you see this? Some sludgy old oil in the bottom of this thing, and when we heat it, that should get liquid and come out the hole if we work it out right. So what I'm going to do is take this donut. This is from one of my All-American 5 radios. This is a tube wiring shield, and if you look at my other video on how GE wired radios in the 1950s, you'll see what these are used for. But it turns out it's a real handy thing to hold the rotor. I don't know what to suggest you use if you don't have one of these lying around, but surely you can find something metal to hold this thing. Anyway, we'll just stick that in the middle of the thing. Take the hole and put it down, and then shove this in the oven at 140 degrees Fahrenheit for 15-20 minutes. This is at 20 minutes, so we'll let it go 20 minutes here. And while that is cooking, I'm going to get some solvent together. Okay, so we're going to use some Brake Clean Red, which is tetrachloroethylene. Nice chlorinated solvent, which I'm not supposed to have here in California, but you know, apparently Amazon will ship things anywhere. This stuff's pretty nasty, but it doesn't leave any residue, and it dissolves the gunk, so it really works the business even if it destroys the planet. Forgive me. And then I have a Kymax glass beaker here. I'm going to just spray some in. So there we go. And we can suck this up with a hypodermic and use it to inject into the rotor. Okay, so that's 20 minutes. And we'll turn that off. And let's grab a pot holder. Let's see what we got going here, if anything. Put this up here. Oh yeah. Got anything coming out? Nope, don't see anything, but it's nice and warm. So let's take this in back and give it a little injection. Okay, yeah, sometimes a little oil comes out, sometimes it doesn't in the oven. So what we're going to do is take a blunt-nosed hypodermic. Is that okay? Okay, and we will fill this up with solvent. Oops, I need to get a new one here, hang on. So I have a 3 milliliter hypo here and the solvent. So we'll go ahead and load this up. And it's a blunt needle, and we'll go stick it in our hole. Give everything a nice wash. And then we'll give it a shaky. And see if we can suck some of that out now. And if you get this right, you can get to the bottom of the chamber. And bring it all back out. And you can see, see if I got this white box here. You can see that it's kind of amber colored because it's pulling the old oil out. And we'll just get rid of that. Here, this is kind of a good view. Can you see that okay? Going in and coming out. So we're just going to repeat this until it runs clear. These rotors hold about 6 milliliters, or 5.5 or so, which is why I think 2 milliliters is the right amount of lubricant to put in, because that fills up like the lower third. That's like half a teaspoon. If you put too much lubricant inside, even if it's a lightweight lubricant, the torque of the motor can't overcome all the lubrication. And it really is meant to be like an engine where the crankcase is splashing around in a pan of oil. And we're still kind of yellow there. Anyway, I will do this a few times and speed this video up now so that you don't have to sit through all this. Okay, and that's pretty good. That's just about all of it. I'll do one more because I've got the stuff here. And that is clear now. We'll just keep sucking till we get... Okay, that's about it. There you can kind of, that's even diluted, but you can kind of see the difference there. Now you can just let the solvent evaporate, and I'll probably let the rotor sit overnight, but I do like to take a can of air. This is a Office Depot cleaning duster. It's cheaper than tech spray, by the way, and works fine for those of us who don't have a compressor and want to spray things. And then just watch the blowback, because it does shoot out of here. You kind of get it in there. See that? So now we'll just let that dry overnight. Okay, so it's the next day. This has been sitting overnight with the hole down, and if I smell it, there's no more smell of solvent, so I think we're good and ready to put oil in this thing. And what we want to put in it is clock oil. We don't want to put motor oil in it. We don't want to put Marvel Mystery Oil in it. We don't want to put 3-in-1 oil in it. We don't want to put in WD-40. That actually will damage things. We want to use clock oil, because clock oil is formulated for the metals in here, particularly the brass, and it's the right consistency to flow correctly by the capillary action. So people are using all kinds of other oils, but really you want to go with some clock oil. You can spend a lot of money on a little amount of clock oil. This Liberty product, can you see that okay? This light's not so good. This Liberty oil is like $9 on Amazon. Hopefully it's real clock oil and not some automotive counterfeit. But I'm assuming it is what it says on the tin. And so this is the stuff to use. Don't mess around with some of the other stuff people recommend on the internet. And as I said, this thing holds about 6 milliliters. We want to put about 2 milliliters in it to fill it, you know, a third of the way up, so that the gear train can splash around in the bottom here. So I'll go ahead and pull out 2 milliliters. Just like that. Oh, a little more. There we go. And that's about half a teaspoon. I'm a little over. Let me lose some of this here. There we go. All right, and then this goes right in here. And done. I'll get a little shaky. If you want to test it before we seal the hole and make sure it works, you can just take the armature of the clock, and I put the screws back in to hold it the right distance. I have this on an isolation transformer. I'm going to hold my thumb over the hole, because as the gears spin in there, it does tend to splash the oil around. Someone's racing their car outside. That's great. Okay. Turn that on. And she's turning. I don't know if you can see. Just trying to lift this up without shorting these wires. I guess you kind of see it going around there. This one isn't as quiet as the other one I did. It's quieter than it was. But we'll let it run in a little while. This one also rattled more, so I think the gears are more worn inside this one. Okay. So we know we got a working motor, and now we want to seal this up. And there's two ways to seal it up. People use epoxy, and people solder it. And I'm afraid to solder it, because this is one time I'm afraid if I do get metal splashing down in there, it actually will get on the gears, and there'll be no way to get it out. So epoxy for me is the way to go. And let's take a break here, and I'll grab that and we'll mix them up. Okay, let's mix up some epoxy here. I will speed this up so you don't have to suffer through the details. This is just cheap, quick-drying epoxy. So this has about a 5-minute working time, and I don't want to use it immediately because it's kind of liquid. So I'm going to burn a minute and a half here and start to get it a little hard before I drop it onto the hole. Okay, that's about a minute and a half, and this is a good consistency. So I'll just take a blob here. I'd like to show you closely what I'm doing, but I need to see it myself. And we just kind of blob that in the hole and give it a little twist. And we'll let that settle down in there a little bit. I kind of would like to not get this on here. So here we are, a day later. The epoxy's dry. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's not too bad. I really did have to mess around with a toothpick as it was drying to get it to blob over the hole. I really think you need to wait towards the end of the 5-minute working time. A minute and a half just wasn't enough. So it's still kind of fiddly. Maybe soldering is the way to go if you did it upside down and put it on a hot soldering iron and some flux on the metal. I don't know. I have to experiment with sealing techniques, but for now, epoxy is what I do. So that's it. Yeah, I guess the other two tips I forgot to mention, the Liberty oil is a synthetic oil. You want to use a synthetic oil because that'll last till the end of Western civilization. And even 2 milliliters might be too much. 1.6, a true half teaspoon might be a better amount, but somewhere between 1.6 and 2 milliliters is the way to go on that. So now I will stick this in the clock, and we will run it in for a while and see how well it works. Thanks for watching. So the good news is when I put the rotor back in the clock, it got real quiet, so yay.